G'day, welcome back to part 2 of this project, doing up an old steel. So we'll go into pull that steel apart that we're going to do up, have a quick look at it, and then we'll get into it. We'll talk about some grinders and we'll start doing some grinding. Righto. Okay, so we'll have a bit closer look at this this old F-dick. We can see the maker's mark has been really worn on this one, but we can just still see that arrow on there that's pointing back to the handle, which means that it was made before World War II. So this is known as a pre-war F-dick, and modern after that. I guess the factory damaged or destroyed during the war in Germany, and then when they've tooled up again. Now if we look on the modern stamp on an F-dick, we can see the arrow now points the opposite way. So that's just a way. So that's a post-war. It's pointing down to the tip, and when it's pointing up to the handle, it's known as a pre-war F-dick. So we've took the hanger off this fella, and when we pull this handle off and the ferrule off, looking at it, I think well, clearly whoever's had this has been welded. So normally a lot of these German ones, you won't see a weld in here, but by looks of it, I reckon this steel, someone's done it up in the past and repaired it and welded this back on here. We'll have a good look at that, make sure it's strong. So when you weld these on, we've got to be careful. Well, clearly it needs to be a decent weld, but when it's inside the handle, there's none of that side or lateral pressure on it, so it's going to be strong. So we need to make sure when we do the weld, it's going to be up inside the handle and not at the base of the steel here. So if we weld them there, firstly it's going to ruin the hardness, your temper of your steel, the welder will, and you're going to have a weak point right here outside the handle, and it's over time that will break. Another way you can do these, I've seen done, you can take the temper out of this portion of the steel by heating it up to a blue and letting it cool down. You've got to be careful the heat doesn't travel down into the steel and ruin the temper down in here. And what I mean by ruin the temper, when you've taken the temper, you're actually softening the steel. So you can, if that's been broken off cleanly here, take the hardness out of it, and then we'll thread and put some threaded rod down into the handle and coming up. That's another way of doing it. It's going to be very strong, but the risk is you're going to have a soft portion in the steel, because these, as they're way too hard to drill or cut a thread down in there, because it's been hardened. You end up breaking the tap off if you can even drill it. Even if you use a carbide drill, chances are you're going to use a carbide tap, chances are you'll probably break it off in there. So if you needed to do that, you'd heat it up to take the temper out of it. All right, so what we're aiming to do, we've got to get all these pits, so we can see this is quite rusty, and that there's a really, really deep one down in here. We can see we can't have that. That has to come out, and it's quite deep, that fella. So we're going to have to. We can't just grind. We don't want to put a flat in this area. So when we grind it, we're going to have to take that out and continue that, so we keep that taper right down here, so we don't get a dip in the steel when we grind that out. Righto, so quickly, now we've got the old steel, I'll put a bit of tape around the maker's mark here so we don't forget and grind over it. So you don't want to grind your maker's mark out of these, especially anything like this one that's got a bit of heritage. It's already not much of that mark left, so we want to retain all of that. So we'll come back to that right at the end. We'll just lightly clean that area up. Once you remove that maker's mark, you not only remove a lot of value from the steel, you won't know down the track, or people won't know if you try to sell it what it was. So it always pays to careful of that maker's mark, leave it in there, and it'll retain a bit more value if you do go to sell it, and the heritage of the steel. So righto, so how are we going to get this steel? We've got to get all them pits out, so that's what we're going to aim to do. So as we talked about, it's bloody hard. It's hardened steel, it's not going to be easy. If you think you're going to rub it back with sandpaper, you're dreaming. It's not going to happen. It's going to take bloody a month of Sundays and some try and do that. Some of my earlier videos we looked at rubbing a diamond stone on the steel to get rid of the scratches. We only sort of do that on a finished steel with a small bit of pitting, that you don't want to go to the trouble of grinding it right back and starting again. But when they're this bad, this is what we've got to do. We've got to grind it out. It's hardened steel. You're not going to do it on the lathe unless you've got a tool post grinder or something. Even then, it's not so easy. So what we're left with is using grinders, belt sanders of some sort. So we'll have a look at a few different options or work at the start, which you may have at home, right up to the big knife maker's grinder, which is obviously ideal, but I'm sure not everyone has one of them at home. Okay, so the bottom of the pile, you might have one of these hand belt sanders at home. You can turn it upside down and lock it in a vise or something and grind on this. But if all these grinders, you need to find a bit of unsupported belt, like here, just in front of that hard platen, and that's the area where you're going to need to grind on, because if you grind on these on the hard backing where the platen is, it's going to bounce and you're going to get little grooves and bumps, and so we want to avoid that. So we need to work on this part of it, but that'll probably get the job done if you can get a good 40 grit belt for it. Then moving up, a mouldy tool. These are pretty common. These run pretty fast though, so you've got to be careful you don't overheat it. And obviously belt selections plays a big part in these. So if you can get these ceramic belts, you get them from Gamaco. I can put a link down in the description. 40 grit ceramic. These just eat metal, harden, doesn't matter if it's hardened, like nothing else. So that's where we want to start off with at this point, the coarsest one that you can get. There's some other zirconia type belts that you can get, and if you can't get them, the aluminium oxide ones are okay if you're just doing a one-off job. But see if you can track these ceramic ones down. They're certainly the go. So moving up, this is probably the Rolls Royce for doing something like this. So that's a 2x72 grinder. Most people into making knives will have one of these. They're variable speed, so we can slow it down, speed it up, and new coarse ceramic belt on that will eat this steel up quick as we feed into it. So we've got to be careful. But beauty this one, we can slow it down so it doesn't get too hot. Righto, so if you can pull the handle off, put in a hand drill like this, so we can just turn it slowly. That does make it a lot easier. It's pretty hard to get these to run perfectly true in the drill, so you can see there's a bit of wobble in that. You can fool around and just slowly bend that and you'll get it running somewhat true, but it's not a big deal because we're going to be just running this pretty slow and trying to hold it onto that slack bit of the belt so we don't get that bounce. If you can't pull the handle off and you just obviously you're not going to then put in the drills, you're just going to have to turn it by hand and just be careful to keep it turning all the time so you don't grind flat spots into the steel when you stop it. That's the beauty of putting it into a drill. Just run it slow like that, keeping it hard on the belt, and keeping it moving all the time. And usually bare hands so we can watch it's not getting hot, and a bucket of water. Dip it in the water, keep it cool, that's key. Don't let it overheat or she'll go soft on you, you'll ruin the temper and you've just wasted your time and money. Alright, so make sure you put on some safety glasses. I like to put on earmuffs, a few tunes in there while you're doing it, and a respirator or P2 mask. Everyone at this point in time should have a mask of some sort at home. So this grinding dust can be a bit nasty. You're breathing it in. Good idea if you can help it and not breathe it in. Demonstration, I'm not going to put it on at the start, but off camera I'll put the mask on so I don't breathe too much of that crap in. Okay, so I'm going to start grinding here. I'll slow that belt down. I've got a bucket of water here. So as I go, I'm going to just keep dunking in there and keep it cool as we go. Okay, so we can see there, that's fairly chewing it off. I was running the drill a bit too fast and I was getting a lot of wobble on there because that's not real true at all. But when I slow the drill down so it's just barely turning, it was a lot easier to manage on the belt there. We stopped getting that bounce on there. Okay, so we spoke about that big deep pit or whatever's happened right here in the middle, and now we can really see that we've cleaned that up a bit. So we can't just sit here and just grind that out. We've got to work that back and forth and blend it into the whole area as we grind it down. We don't want to get if we just keep holding it there, you're going to get a dip in the steel, and we don't want that. We want that taper to continue smooth right through it. Okay, so at this point we'll go in under the light and we'll have a good look at our progress. We'll check it again with that file, but what you can see is getting a shitload of sparks coming off that. That's a good sign. So high carbon hardened steel should be giving you a good spark. Lots of them little sparks that, as you can see, sort of bursting in the air. If you've come across it's only case hardened and it's soft in the middle, you'll notice a decline in the sparks coming off as you go. Okay, so I've come back in our room here. I'm going to have a look at it under this magnifying light here. These are great, cheap as, get them on eBay, bloody delivered, probably $100 or less. Get the sort of the 5-power one. And they're great to get the steel under a good bit of light and a bit of magnification, just to have a look at your progress. So what you're looking for is any of them little black, you'll see black dots or marks there from still the pits, and we've just got to keep going on that coarse grinding belt till we get them right out. But they tend to be a bit hard to see on the coarse belt. So a lot of times you'll start going into the finer and finer belts, and then you'll suddenly see the ones you missed. Then you've got to go back to the coarse one to get them out. So ideally you're going to try and have a good look and make sure you got them out whilst you're still on the coarse one, just to save you a bit of time. Okay, so when we have a look at that, I don't know if you can see that. So you can see it's still quite a big pit up here. So we need to do a bit more there. That really bad one down towards the end there, it's starting to disappear. So I think we'll be successful here and get it out. But I can see there's still black sort of peppery marks down around this towards the end here, where I sort of haven't been concentrating as much. So we'll go back out there so you can see some there, then black marks still in through here. So we've still got a little bit of work to do there. But when we grab our file that we were checking it earlier, so we can see that's still skating over it nicely, so it's not biting in. So that's a good sign at this point. Okay, so I've been out and had another go at this, and looking under the light I can still see a few pits, and what I do, just get a bit of texture and just highlight them, just to give you a visual when you go back out there. And you can see where I've coloured in some more there, and that's sort of, I don't want to do any unnecessary grinding. The moment it's all looking pretty good, bar just in this area and this bit up here. But what we are starting to see, because this was so badly pitted, and we don't want to ruin that maker's mark, we're starting to get a dip in here where we the transition from where we haven't ground it to where we have ground it, and we can see we're still going to need to take more out of there. So this was a collectible steel. We wouldn't want to keep. This is sort of not what we'd want to do. We'd have to put up with a few pits in it, but because we want to restore this back to a user, and this is a big steel. This is 14-inch steel, so we've still got plenty of shaft there without having to worry about coming down into there. But we'll be able to blend some of this in at the end. That's what we'll aim to do. So it's not as noticeable, but not really a big deal. As I say, it's a big steel. It's not like you're going to need to get right down into here when you're steeling it. But this pit here, I still want to have a go at see if I can clean him up a bit more, and definitely these ones down here in the tip, we want to get them out. Okay, so I've had a look under the light in there, and looks pretty good. I don't see too many or any pits at this point. I'm sure there's probably still some small ones there once we get through that coarse scratches there. So now, beauty of using such a coarse grinding belt and them ceramic ones, they cut very fast and run cool, so you don't get a hell of a lot of heat, and got it off nice and quick. But the downside is we've got some really heavy scratches now to contend with in the steel. So what we're trying to achieve, we've got to get all them lines, every scratch is running now across the steel. We need everything running down the length of the shaft. So we need to get all them out. So if we just started on sandpaper or emery paper now, it's going to take us a hell of a long time to get them scratches out, because they're pretty deep. So what we want to do now, so we want to go from the 40 or 60 grit belt up to next one at least. You can go 40, 60 or jump straight up to 120 grit belt. That's what I'm going to do next. I've got this, I have another 120 grit ceramic belt, but you probably, at this stage, you get away with just an ordinary 120 grit belt. Doesn't need to be ceramic, it's just that I do have it there. So I want to give it a good go on the 120, and then move up to, that's a 150 grit belt, and then a 240 and a 320 if you've got it. So the smoother we can get them scratches out, the easier it's going to be then when we move on to getting rid of everything that's running around it down the length of it. And we need to get everyone out, and we'll go to the point of looking under one of them little microscope to make sure there isn't any there, because we don't want anything where the edge is going to hit into these microscopic scratches. So that's our plan now. Work through the same as what we're doing, keeping an eye on it, keeping it cool. You'll tend to get more heat build up with the finer belts, so be careful, and keep it moving. And when you think you've got them coarse scratches out with the fine belt, give it a bit more before you move on to the next one. There's nothing worse, you get up to your finest belt and then you have a good look and you've got a big deep scratch or a pit there that then you have to go back and start again with the coarse one. Okay guys, so currently I've give that a good hit with 120, 150 and then 240 grit. I've gone back in under the light, had a look, looks pretty good. Don't see anything we've missed. I did, whilst I was on that 240 grit belt, cleaned up that maker's mark, just a bit of that rust off, but I was careful we didn't remove, so we can still see it in there, and it's blended in. It's not too bad, looking better than what it was before. So we'll pull it up there. In the next video, part 3, we'll work on getting all these lines out this steel, and start setting that up, and then we'll start looking at what we're going to do with this handle to get it ready. Okay, see you next time.